Hi guys, I hope you are all really well. This is a video on the differences between savoir and connaître for the verb to know in French. So, yeah, I thought I'd done this video. It's gone missing, so God knows. Okay, so let's just start talking about this. A lot of languages have different verbs to know. So Spanish, we've got saber, conocer, depending on your accent. Listen, kennen, German, sapere, conoscere, Welsh, gwybod, but like most languages I have a working knowledge of have two different verbs for to know, apart from French. So if you're learning French via my channel and you already speak another language, the chances are you've come across this as a problem before. If it's the first time you've come across it, then chances are you're a first language English speaker, okay? So, this is often really badly taught or undertaught, and I don't take any pleasure in an arrogant way of criticising other people, because if knowledge works for you, however different dribs and drabs go into your brain, you know, really put yourself out there, and you know, there are different practitioners, get yourself on YouTube, there's not just me, you know. But I just thought it would be quite useful for this one to explain my kind of take on it, and then just have a little look at other websites and see whether or not these rules, my general rules of thumb, can sort of help you. I think that would be quite a good way to do it. So the first thing to do is to say the verbs themselves. So conjugation wise, savoir, to know, je sais, tu sais, il sait, nous savons, vous savez, ils savent. Yep. Anything interesting happening there? The subjunctive is sache. Yeah, il faut que tu saches. Future conditional sore, like my jaw is sore, like saurait, not saurait or serrer, which are obviously the verb to be and the verb to squeeze, you know. So the fact is sore, so I wouldn't know, je ne saurais pas. So conjugationally, quite interesting. It's one of the interesting verbs because it's a verb which is, we use the subjunctive for the command form, yeah, for the imperative, sache, again. Connaître, ok, je connais, tu connais, il connaît, nous connaissons, vous connaissez, ils connaissent, connaissant, yeah, not connaissant, which I sometimes hear. Apart from that, pretty okay. Past tense is su and connu, more on that later, both of them end in an u. So pretty irregular verbs, but that's not what you're here for. You're here to kind of work out the difference between the two. So, off we go. People tend to say, savoir is to know a fact, and connaître is to know a person, or, you know, to be familiar with something. And there's kind of information that's useful in both of those statements, but it's not really the whole deal, and it's kind of a bit wrong sometimes. So let's just go over this. The best way of knowing when to use savoir is when you know, in that your sentence, so you can use savoir with a noun, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but that most of the time when you use savoir, you are referring to another verb. So either another verb in the same sentence, or you're referring to a verb that somebody else has mentioned, or it's in the same sentence but a different clause, or it's then going into an infinitive. So in other words, savoir will commonly, very commonly, be referring to when there's another verb going on with it. And connaître will only ever really work when it's referring to another direct object. That could be a person, that could be a place, that could be whatever, okay? So I'll say that again. Savoir is the verb that you need if you are using another verb, and we'll talk about some examples in a second. And connaître is the verb to use if you are, you know, directly knowing a place, a person, or what have you. There is a crossover zone when you are talking about certain expressions like knowing a bit of information, yeah? And we'll talk about this crossover zone in a minute, or knowing something by heart, or what have you. So let's first off talk about the different uses of savoir. So, like I said, if you are using another verb, so I know that you are coming, je sais que tu viens. So you might go, oh, that's the information. It's the information as opposed to being familiar with connaître. And if that works for you, great, but that's not always the answer. So, for example, I know that something is happening. It's about this other verb. Je sais que tu viens. Je sais que tu vas venir. I know you're going to come. I know how to swim. Je sais nager. You don't need the comment in French. And that would imply, I know how to swim. Yeah? But again, it's about the fact that you've got this other verb. Je sais nager. I know how to swim. Moi, je sais parler la langue française. I know how to speak the French language. That's another good one. Anything that's referring to, so some people like to go, oh, it refers to like a question, the answer to a question. I know where you live. I know how you paid for the meal. Alors, moi je sais où tu habites. Moi je sais comment. I know what he does for a job. Je sais ce que. So people are like, often we use savoir when it's referring to an interrogative concept. Yeah, I guess, but you could also just say, well, they're involving other verbs. So I know where you live, another verb. Je sais où tu habites. Je sais où vous habitez. I know why he came. Je sais pourquoi il est venu, because venu is another verb. So my kind of working with another verb idea is pretty powerful there. I know what he's eaten. Je sais ce qu'il a mangé. Yeah. So don't do the interrogative. It's just because within the same sentence there's another verb. Yeah, so savoir is commonly used for that. Savoir could be referring to something that someone else has mentioned the verb on. So, do you know that he's supposed to be coming over later? J'en sais rien. I don't know anything about it. So even though you don't in that sentence mention another verb, you yourself, you are referring kind of predominantly to this usage of another verb in somebody else's language. You know, that's quite normal in French, isn't it? If somebody said, do you want a glass of wine? And you say, you know, do you want some red wine? And you say, no, I don't like it. God, what's wrong with you? You know, you're not mentioning the wine, but you're using the pronoun, you know, so that's quite common. So then let's look at other things to do with savoir. If you were to use it in the past, it's a little bit different. So j'ai su, or in the compound tense. So I've always said before, when you talk about the past as an action, actions have auxiliaries, you need to think of it as a change taking place. So j'ai su would be like the moment I knew coming into fruition. That would be happening, which would kind of be translatable as I found out. Yeah, I found out. Or I suddenly knew, you know. So for example, when I saw the photograph, j'ai su, you know, I knew all of a sudden that it was whatever, you know. And that's an interesting thing that has a slight difference. Right, so let's talk about connaître. So a lot of people with connaître talk about it about being familiar with. So you have to be very careful with that. So that's not a bad idea, but like I said, the problems with connaître is when you can use savoir and connaître, which I'll talk about in a second. So that is quite a good rule of thumb. So for example, if somebody said, oh, do you know Paris? Tu connais Paris? Vous connaissez Paris? Now, let's be very clear about this. In Paris, if you say, do you know Paris? It means, are you familiar with it? As in, you've been there. Yeah? So if somebody said, oh, do you know Brad Pitt? Okay? Then if you meant you knew him, you'd met the guy, then you can use, ouais, je le connais, I know him. If you mean I know who it is, ouais, je sais qui c'est, I know who it is. So if somebody went in a story, oh, so you know Brad Pitt, the guy that was married to Angelina Jolie, oh yeah, I know him, yeah, the actor that was in whatever, Fight Club. You can't do that in French. That would suggest you knew the guy. If you knew him, great, send him my regards. But yeah, so that's a slightly different thing. So really, do you know Paris? Vous connaissez Paris? Then that would mean, are you familiar with Paris? So let's be very clear, it doesn't just have to be a person. So some people go, savoir is to know a thing and connaître is to know a person. Fail, wrong, no. You know, you can use connaître with, you know, do you know the area? Tu connais la région? Do you know my area in London? Tu connais mon quartier? You know, fine, are you familiar with? Okay? So that's a very, very strong thing. Again, you can use savoir and connaître together for if it's referring to having a bit of knowledge or the action of having the knowledge. So for example, do you know the answer? Tu sais les réponses, tu connais les réponses. You can use both. Expression to know something by heart, savoir par cœur, connaître par cœur. Some are used more often than others depending on the colloquialism of the speaker, but there will be some. So you can know, you know, the answer to a question. That would be could be done with savoir or connaître. So some people teach, okay, but if you were going to know something directly, you're going to know no other verb involved, you're just going to know a noun directly. To stick, they say stick to connaître, but you will see both, and I have to really stress that. Okay, again, talking about past tenses, pardon me, there's no corona here, I've had my virus, oh my god, I've had my vaccination. It is, I've got the radiator on. So another great thing is j'ai connu, as in the past tense in French, takes on the meaning of I met. Yeah, right, again, because it's referring to the change of knowing somebody suddenly happening, as in I met somebody I became acquainted with. Okay, so let's now use some example. Let's go through some different websites. I picked some that I really respect, and I picked some that, people would probably see quite a lot, and let's just talk about that. Before we go any further, can I just mention the verb to not know, which people always seem to forget to mention, is ignorer, I-G-N-O-R-E-R. So if you say, I don't know, I'm so sorry, Luke, I don't know your second name, William. So, j'ignore votre deuxième prénom. You can use ignorer to not know something. So let's have a little look at some websites and see whether my general rules of thumb about this verb business, being most of the time for the savoir, familiar with for connaître, but we can know people, nouns, places, whatever, and also this crossover when it's information. Let's see whether there's anything good that comes up. So, what should we do? Which one should we look at first? So I'll pop these underneath. So let's go in reverse. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at fluent you. Fluent you, all right? So I accept all the pop-up-y stuff. Go away, go away, go away. Great. So a guide to using savoir versus connaître. Right, so what's the details here? So to know how to do something. Yeah, so it says we need to use savoir if we need to know how to do something. Okay, so I know how to swim. They've used the same example I did. Yeah, okay, great. But the fact is, you don't need to learn, so it's when you know how to do something. If you use my general trick, are you then using it with another verb? So, je sais nager. What has he got here? Marie knows how to drive. Marie sait conduire. Again, so rather than listing when you know how to do something, if you just think, okay, if it's going to be used with another verb, savoir. So Marie knows how to drive, Marie sait conduire. Great, as I said, you don't need the comme on there, you don't need the how, all right? To have knowledge of, regarding a situation, a state of being, or a state of affairs, okay? I know where you live. I don't know when the party's starting. Okay, fine, yeah, but that's not wrong, but to have to learn that is really, really, really heavy. So again, it's just this idea of, are you using savoir with another verb? So I know where you live, je sais où tu habites. Sounds a bit, I know where you live. I don't know when the party's starting. Je sais pas quand la fête commence. Great, okay, but rather than going, so knowledge of a state of affairs, with another verb, savoir. In the passé composé, perfect past, meaning to find out or to learn. Yeah, we've spoken about that. So, j'ai su qu'il a menti. I found out that he lied. Okay? Lovely. The various uses of connaître. To know a person personally. So, moi, je connais Michel. Great, yeah. So you could say there, if you could swap it for I am familiar with, to know a person, then yeah, you can't use savoir with a person. You can use connaître with a person. So in the zone where you can use both, yeah, that wouldn't be with a person, that would be with a noun. That would be with a non-person. So for example, I know the answer. It could be je sais la réponse, je connais la réponse. But if you are knowing a person, it will be connaître. So because it's familiarity, it's being familiar with somebody, but it's also, there's no other verb there, and it's direct object. So those are the clues that take us towards connaître. And as I said, some teachers will say, well, if in doubt, use connaître if there's just a direct, I know, nothing else, no other further clause, just use connaître. So I know Michel, je connais Michel. Marie and Paul know Martine. Yeah, Marie et Paul connaissent Martine. So to be familiar with a person, place or thing. Again, like we said, so I know Paris, je connais Paris, that's lovely. But as it said, it does stress underneath, this is understood to mean I have been to Paris, rather than knowing what it is from Google Images or love Google Images. But I went on holiday to Lanzarote on a swimming holiday, and I said to my best friend who went with me, do you want to come up La Montagne Roja? Do you want to come and look at this? And she went, is it on Google Images? Do I really need to see it in person? I was like, yes, you do. Good. So I know this film. Je connais ce film, as in I have knowledge of this film. I am familiar with this film. So, yeah. Again, notice all of these are direct verbs. In the passé composé, meaning to meet for the first time, I met Michel in Paris. J'ai connu Michel à Paris. Lovely. Lovely. Good, good, good. Then it talks about either savoir or connaître. So this section I talk about, which is where it can be both. So in French, there are certain cases in which the choice between savoir or connaître is up to you. Talk about a good deal. There are two instances. I like this person's attitude. There are two instances where this is the case. If you're talking about knowing or having a piece of information, yes, so that's what I said. So for example, I know his address. Ouais, je sais son adresse, or je connais son adresse. Okay. If you're talking about knowing something by heart, what did I say? Yep. So je connais par cœur, je sais par cœur. You will hear both. Okay. And then it just goes into some great expressions. That's actually quite useful. Some common expressions with savoir that we would use that would make you sound a bit more French like us. So on sait jamais, you never know. Qui sait, who knows. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Good. So far, not false information, but just a bit of a heavy way of remembering it for the first bit. Okay. So lovely. Let's go on to the next one. Savoir versus connaître, the verb to know in French. This is now FrenchToday.com. All right. And this is written by Camille Chevalier Carais. Okay, so lots and lots. Table of contents. Wow, quite a lot to know. So to know in French, savoir versus connaître. Connaître, to know is to be personally acquainted with. Answering a question with connaître in French. More Q&A regarding to know in French. Typical dialogues. To know a noun. Oh, right. So let's see. So it seems quite complicated so far. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong information, but we need a logic language learning method through it. So number one, to know in French, savoir versus connaître. So savoir is followed by an interrogative expression. You know where he... Yeah, so this is what I was saying. This is what some teachers do. And there's no need to teach this. It's just really heavy. So you know where he lives. Do you know at what time they're arriving? Do you know why he said that? Those are the examples she's given. So, tu sais où il habite? Savez-vous à quelle heure ils arrivent, pardon? Et sais-tu pourquoi il a dit ça? Great. But again, rather than going followed by an interrogative expression, if you are using knowledge that is then referring to another verb, you will use savoir. All right? Savoir is followed by a verb to say knowing how to. Yes, we've said that already. So, I know how to dance. At least somebody's not swimming. Alors moi, je sais danser. I do know how to dance, actually. And savoir can be used alone. Well, that's a bit of a weird statement. Savoir can be used alone. Tu sais qu'il arrive à 3 heures. Oui, je sais. So that's not quite well explained. Let's be very clear. So in the first thing there, you know he's coming at 3 o'clock. Like I said, that clause, that is referring to, you know that he's coming at 3 o'clock. Tu sais qu'il arrive à 3 heures. So because we're using it referring to another verb, we will use savoir. And then the response, oui, je sais, as I said in my introduction, if you use savoir on its own to refer to this other verb that somebody else is on about, that's completely fine. Yeah, either just everybody knows what you're referring to, as long as it's referring to another verb, savoir, great. Good. So that's not brilliantly explained, but yeah, it's correct, but it's just an odd way of doing it. Connaître. So connaître means to know with the idea to be personally familiar with, to have experienced it yourself. It is always followed by a noun. Yes, yes, yes. In most cases, connaître is followed by nouns of people and places. True, but as she said, there could be areas where it's both. Yeah, so as in, where it's both savoir or connaître. So do you know Sylvie? Tu connais Sylvie? Vous connaissez Paris? Do you know Paris? Good, good, good. So this is where, again, it stresses, be careful. It suggests that you must have a knowledge of the place to use it with a place. Yeah, so it's like, so you know Bath. It's like if you go down the M4, head west. Oh, yeah, I know. Somebody would say that in English and they'd never been there. So you know Washington, D.C., yeah, whatever, capital of, political capital of America. You might never have been there. You can't say that in French. Yeah, you can't say that in French. You'd have to use it if you'd been there. Good. And then she talks about how important that is, the knowing somebody that's there. Good. Answering a question with connaître. Yes, now this is quite useful. Do you know Paris? Oui, j'y suis allé. Yes, I've been there. Yes, I've already met them. So do you know, vous connaissez Luc? Do you know Luc? Oui, je l'ai déjà rencontré. Yes, so it's nice answers to the question of do you know somebody using connaître. So that little section 3 there is quite useful. Good. More of the same. More, weirdly, more of the same. Section 4. I don't know why it needs to be a different section. Have you, do you know... So do you know various places? Non, mais j'en ai entendu parler. I've heard about them. So that would be to differentiate between the English. Do you know the Loire Valley? Yeah, oh yeah, in France, by the Loire. Yeah, I know what you mean. So it shows you ways of getting out of that in French. That's quite a useful section. So oui, j'en ai entendu parler. I've heard about it. As in, I've never been there by myself. That's useful. Do you know Sylvie? Non, mais j'ai entendu parler de lui. I've heard of him. I've heard of her. That's quite useful. Okay. Do you know who it is? Tu sais qui c'est? Non, je sais pas qui c'est. I don't know. In English, I don't know them. In French, I don't know who they are. Je sais pas qui c'est. Good. So 3 and 4 is quite useful there, despite 1 and 2 being a bit weird. Then we've got just some dialogue with pretty much the same thing as just above. So section 5 is a repetition of section 4. To know and a noun in French. So this should be interesting. Now, all this being said, they say, I have to admit that savoir can also be used with a noun, like I've said, but never with a person, like I've said. So savoir is used with a noun. It has the meaning of knowing as a result of having studied, learning, So in other words, a bit of information, like I said. So you can use connaître, and she says, why make your life difficult? Well, I understand that. So stick with connaître and a noun and you'll be fine. So do you know the lesson that you meant to have studied? Tu sais la leçon? Tu sais ta leçon? Tu connais ta leçon? Great, 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 great. Yes, you can. But like I said, if it's referring to a bit of knowledge, you can use both. To know by heart. Again, to know by heart has come up. Savoir par cœur, connaître par cœur. To know in the biblical sense. We don't need to know that. Good. So we move on to the next one. So now we are using French Quizzic.com. So, there's a really good question on this that I wanted to bring up, and I think I've lost it. Okay, so what's this saying? So this is Quizzic. Savoir is usually used with a clause, that is a group of words including a conjugated verb. These clauses can be introduced by words like qui, que, quand, oui, combien, ce que, ce qui. Now this is more useful. I mean, it could have been streamlined to when there is another verb, but this is quite useful. This is just opening it up to the fact that it's different clauses. So I know that he's coming. Je sais qu'il vient ce soir. He knows what you want. Il sait ce que tu veux. You don't know who did it. Tu ne sais pas qui l'a fait. Ray knows how many matches there are in the box. Diverse, but there you go. Ray sait combien d'allumettes il y a dans la boîte. She doesn't know where she's going. Lovely. So makes sense, but this could have been streamlined to savoir with more information. Another verb, yeah? Great. Savoir can also be followed by an infinitive to express the knowledge of how to do something. He knows to... Oh, no one's swimming again. So, il sait jouer aux échecs. He knows how to play chess. Do you know how to speak French? Savez-vous parler français? There's a difference between parler français and parler le français. Formally, parler le français and parler français... strictly speaking, parler le français is the knowledge of how... When you use parler, like parler le français is the knowledge of the ability to do it. And parler français means what somebody was doing. So like he speaks French with his mother. So you do see... But we get those confused in France all the time, so it's fine. And that's why when you then have another language, if you then have another verb with a language as a noun, people drop the le all the time. So they say things like, I'm learning Italian, j'apprends italien, because they've heard, tu parles italien. But it should be, j'apprends l'italien, I'm learning Italian, for example. So good, so connaître. Connaître is followed by a noun. Yes, but so is savoir sometimes, we've talked about that, which can be a person, place, thing, or a fact. I know Marc, je connais Marc. She knows Paris very well, elle connaît bien Paris. Do you know Philippe? Est-ce que tu connais Philippe? She knows this recipe off by heart. Elle connaît cette recette par cœur. They know the timetable. Ils connaissent l'horaire. So again, yep, the only ones that would bother you there, I think, would be to know the timetable, because if you were using the rule of it makes sense with knowledge, it's something that you know here rather than being familiar with, you might be tempted to use savoir, and you could have used savoir there. So again, when it's information, you can use both. In some cases, relating to abstract things, both verbs can be used colloquially. Je connais la vérité, I know the truth. Je sais la vérité, je sais les réponses, je connais les réponses. Yeah, good. So that's not a bad example. There's a better Quizzic problem. I'll look for it in a second. This is University of Texas educational page. Joe Bob. Text. Explain the difference between savoir and... Well, they're going very locally. Explain the difference between savoir and connaître to me. I don't understand. Text. It's very simple, Joe Bob. One knows with savoir. Laughs like Baxter. So, but one knows with connaître people and places. So they're just saying facts are savoir and people and places are connaître. So I know Tammy and France and the Eiffel Tower would be connaître, true, but facts are savoir. That's a little bit simplistic, and we've already talked about the fact that that doesn't cover everything. No, that's not. That one's not. Although those statements aren't wrong, they're not completely right, because there are exceptions with facts with connaître. So that's yeah, that's not cool. No, savoir and connaître. So this is now, what website is this? Cliff's Notes. Okay. In French, two regular verbs expressed to know. So use the verb connaître when you can substitute the words with to be familiar with. I know Luc. Oh, good. Most people do. So je connais Luc. I know the song. Je connais cette chanson. I'm familiar with this song. True, but for example, you don't say... So I suppose I am familiar with the response. I know the answer. You wouldn't in English. So you can say I'm familiar with this song. So that's a good idea. Yeah, if you can say familiar with, you can use connaître. But you could say I am familiar. You wouldn't say I am familiar with the answer, and it would still, you could still get away with je sais les réponses, je connais les réponses. You could still do both. So using connaître as using the law, if you can say to be familiar with, means it's going to be connaître. A bit weak, all right? Savoir, however, means to know in the sense of knowing how to do something or knowing something by heart. Well, that's crap, because we've already expressed the fact that savoir par cœur and connaître par cœur both exist. So you can say, I know you off by heart, je te connais par cœur. How did you know I was going to be there? With a gun. Je te connais par cœur. Guns are dumb and kill people, don't have them. So, unless, of course, it's your job. So, savoir expresses the knowledge of facts or reasons about certain things. I know how to dance. Je sais comment... Oh, this is poorly worded. I know the song. Je sais cette chanson. So, it's not quite expressed it well, but it's sort of trying to get across there. The idea that je connais cette chanson and je sais cette chanson. One would be like, I'm familiar with it, and the other one would be like, I know it well enough to sing it there. So that's true on that. It doesn't specifically make that point, but there's a bit of subtlety between the two. To express know-how, il sait lire, he knows how to read, we've done that. In the passé composé, to express to find out or to learn about something. Good. I found out, je l'ai su. Same. Good. Savoir, next one. So this is now French today. Anything new there? Anything there? No, that's just a board on that one. Nothing really useful that one. Savoir versus connaître, lawless French. Lawless French, do like a bit of lawless. I think she was one of the writers on aboutfrench.com. It's often quite lengthy explanation, but it's very solid. Let's have a little look. Never heard her speak, but she writes about grammar very well. So lawless French, let's have a look at lawless French. So do you know how to say no in French? Savoir versus connaître. So savoir is used when there's another verb involved. Well done. The first person who said it. Savoir is used when there is another verb involved. Great. Savoir is used when there's another verb involved. When that verb is an infinitive, the English equivalent is to know how to. I know how to build a fire. Alors je sais faire du feu. He doesn't know how to swim. We're all bloody obsessed with swimming as teachers. Il sait pas nager. Il ne sait pas nager. Good. Notice the word how is implicit in French and must not be translated. Do not say je sais comment. Yeah, you don't say I know how. Good. Lovely. Good. When the other verb is a subordinate clause, savoir indicates a knowledge of the fact or the action. So in other words, yeah, if you're using savoir and then you'd have something in the middle, like a que, or something to that effect, or a quand. So I know she's going to be late. Je sais qu'elle va être en retard. Il sait quand tu as trouvé le document. He knows when you found the document. Great, because there's another verb. Well done, Lawless. Laura, I believe her name is Laura Lawless. I always go to say Lucy, like Lucy Lawless, but that was Xena Warrior Princess. Good. The clause may be replaced by a pronoun or implied. Well done. Great. Exactly. That's exactly right. So you might not actually even get to say the other verb in full, but you are referring to it. So, for example, who's coming to the party? Qui vient à la fête? J'en sais rien. Great. Exactly. Perfect example. What I said earlier. Michael wants to be a lawyer. Michel va être avocat. Oui, je sais. As in, I know he wants to be a lawyer. Oui, je sais. So there's no other verb present, but it's I know he wants to be a lawyer. Great, perfect. Connaître must be used with the direct object, which may be a person, place, or a thing. While connaître can be translated by to know, it might be helpful to think of it as to be familiar with. Now that I like, because she's not saying it is definitely that, but she says it might be helpful. So that's quite good. So do you know Hervé? Do you know Paris? Do you know French? So je connais bien le français. Lovely, useful. Bit of information. Je connais bien le français. Good. Good. Two other meanings of to know can be translated by the verb. To know a bit of information. Good job, Miss Lawless. To know a bit of information. Il sait toujours la date. Il connaît toujours la date. He always knows the date. Okay? I don't know his telephone number. I'm sure I do. Je sais pas son numéro de téléphone. Je connais pas son numéro de téléphone. Good. Because it's knowledge of a bit of information. Good. Anything else? Savoir versus connaître in the passé composé. Good. We can't blame her. Because she's talking about the two in the past as in to have found something out. Lovely. I swear all these teachers use the same examples. J'ai su que tu avais menti. Now that's interesting because earlier when it was I found out you lied, my brain wanted to say, but I found out that you lied would be kind of prior to that. So I found that out on the timeline and before that you lied, which would kind of suggest the usage of a plus que parfait. So yeah, so j'ai su que tu avais menti. I found out that you had lied. He didn't learn her name before leaving. Il n'a pas su son prénom avant de partir. Le prince charmant en Cendrillon, Prince Charming and Cinderella. J'ai connu un Parisien à l'université. I met a Parisian at university. Good. Lovely. Also, side note, notice the Parisien there is a capital P. Good. Elle n'a jamais connu mes parents. She never met my parents. Good. Yes, so when they're in the past, they've got their own specific usages. Lovely. Good. So we've ended on a high note. So an overview then. If you are using a sentence like I know that you are, alors moi je sais que. So in other words, you can straight away, if you're not going, so connaître will only ever go into a noun. Person or place or what have you, but it will go into a thing directly. So straight away, if you are using any other kind of arrangement other than that, then you know the verb that you want is savoir. You know that the verb you want is savoir. However, we are also saying connaître is not the only verb you can use with a noun. We've spoken about if the noun is being used to do with a little bit of knowledge or information, then that could be savoir or connaître as well. And you've noticed some teachers, some practitioners sort of go, oh, just use connaître, it will help you, but at least you understand where the debate comes from. This is, you know my whole method is about muscle memory, and there's things that you want to get in your muscle memory. You'll come across both for these, okay? So I think the last one was probably the best, really, if I'm honest. Well, I think my own examples are pretty bloody marvellous, but the point is if you are using it with another verb, use savoir. If you are talking about being familiar with, particularly with a person or a place, you will use connaître. The crossover is when you are talking about a bit of information, knowing that information, or like I said, with expression par cœur. And then if you find anything useful about all of these websites, I haven't read incorrect French in any of these websites. So in other words, even if you not want the learning rules, as long as you get the muscle memory of the examples used, that's a good start. So like I say, no matter what French you use, no matter what you're doing, make sure you've watched my reading rules video, and then you can read any of these websites out loud, beautifully joining the words and getting it into the muscle memory, which would mean you don't know the grammar. In other words, you're English. Because if you say to a Brit, what do we use there? The man whom, the man who. We just repeat it several times. We don't, unless you work in language, know why. Yeah. So good. I hope this has been useful. Please do click like if this was useful. John, I hope this has been useful to you. I teach two Johns. I've got John, who's English, and John, who's American. So I refer to him in my own brain as John. So can you, John, thank you for asking the question. Guys, if you found it useful, please click like, please subscribe. Don't be afraid to ask any other questions, and I will refer you either to videos or do you a video. I do have a Kofi link underneath, which is just a few pounds, a few dollars, which just basically keeps me going, buys me a little coffee for my time and my energy, which I do appreciate. The podcasts are still available, and depending on your country being in lockdown, they are on half price. So we're still on lockdown in the UK, so they are on half price, which is all my vocab information, all the exam board vocabulary lists read out at speed. All my class teaching podcast, which is you listening to other people being whipped into shape, and all my grammar podcasts, which go through from the very beginning to the very end of all French conjugations and adverbs and yada yada yada. So do please click like if this was useful. Do let me know underneath. I hope you know a little bit more about the verb to know. Okay, take care guys, loads of love.